Deandre Ayton, 4-year, $133 million maximum offer sheet with the Indiana Pacers. Phoenix now has 48 hours to match the largest offer sheet in NBA history.
We got some absolutely huge news in regards to Deandre Ayton and the Phoenix Suns and the Indiana Pacers. It's not as black and white as you think. Deandre Ayton is not joining a new team, at least not yet. I'm going to walk you through every single possibility that could occur as a result of this brand new transaction that we just learned of. And before we get to the content, man, make sure you drop a like, subscribe, and turn on our notifications to help the channel grow. This is our second upload of today. So if you wanted an update on the fact that Donovan Mitchell is potentially going to get traded to the New York Knicks, make sure you check out our previous video and our documentary on Shaq's son Sharif. If you think I talk too much or you want shorter versions of this content, make sure you follow me on TikTok at The Flight Mike or my Instagram, same name, at The Flight Mike. Now that we got all that out of the way, cue the intro. Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? The Phoenix Suns have been in such a strange situation over the past few years. I mean, this all technically started a year ago. You see, in the 2018 NBA draft, the Phoenix Suns had the privilege of having the #1 overall pick. Now, you have to understand, coming up to this point, the Phoenix Suns have been missing on a lot of their draft acquisitions, whether it was via draft day trade, which I'm going to consider that to be their draft pick, or however their means of acquiring talent. They've just been missing ever since the drafting of Devin Booker. So as a result, they were a little bit more risk averse. So if you go back to the 2016 NBA draft, they went ahead and drafted Dragon Bender and Marquise Chris. Obviously, one of them was acquired via a trade. Both of those ended up being colossal busts. Then in 2017, they drafted Josh Jackson with a top 5 pick. And well, that didn't work out either. Bear in mind that they drafted him over the likes of De'Aaron Fox, and they desperately needed a point guard at that point. So going into the 2018 NBA draft, I guess the best way you could say the scenario that the Phoenix Suns were in was, one, they were desperate, and two, they were incredibly risk averse. And you might not recall, but the 2018 NBA draft had a lot of risks in the top 5. I mean, you had Trae Young, who was kind of slowing down at the latter part of his college career, and many people were questioning whether or not he would be able to develop into the next Stephen Curry. Of course, you had Luka Doncic, which I'm assuming in the Phoenix Suns heads, which I understand this could be a little ignorant, but the Phoenix Suns thought, well, we just took a risk on a foreign player recently. If we whiff on another foreign player once again, then we'll never forgive ourselves. We've already gone through this before. We're not taking our chances on Luka, which again, if you looked into Luka's tape, you would have probably had a different conclusion back then, but that's besides the point. Then you have Marvin Bagley, who everyone was calling the next coming of Chris Bosh, and then you had Deandre Ayton, who everyone was at the time saying was the next coming of Karl Anthony Towns and the safest pick at the #1 overall spot. And that's not to say that the Phoenix Suns made a mistake drafting Deandre Ayton with the #1 overall pick. You just have to understand that they were terrified of messing up yet another top 5 draft pick again. And to their credit, this draft was actually fairly remarkable for them. They got Deandre Ayton. They were able to trade and get Mikal Bridges as well. Both big parts of their rotation. And following this year, they started doing better in the NBA draft. Here's where things got a little problematic. Following that incredible bubble performance where they went undefeated in the bubble, but weren't good enough to make it to the play-in, the Phoenix Suns decided to swing for the fences. They traded for Chris Paul. This took a team that was already trending upward and put them in a situation where, at least on paper, they are contenders. Chris Paul was the missing piece. It's all that they needed. They just needed a floor general, and they got quite possibly one of the greatest floor generals in NBA history. And as a result of that, now the Phoenix Suns have a championship window, and that championship window is directly proportional to how long Chris Paul could stay a productive point guard for, at least from this point to the end of his career. And they're betting pretty big on Chris Paul being able to be one of those LeBron James-esque players, not in the sense where he's going to put the same exact production up as LeBron James, but will at the very minimum be able to continue this level of productivity until the age of 40. And they're paying him as such. A 4-year, $120 million contract extension at the age of 36, which means when it comes to Deandre Ayton, their hands are a little tied. And the thing that's unfortunate for Deandre Ayton is he's just playing in the wrong era. I mean, if this was the mid-2000s, man, back when teams were trying to build around a center and a guard or a power forward and a guard, then this would have been a perfect scenario for him. But unfortunately for him, the most recent NBA champions won an NBA championship without investing heavily in the center position, and that's just the fact. So I'm assuming what happened is the Phoenix Suns looked at their championship window, which with all due respect could close within the next 2 years or 3 years based upon Chris Paul's play. I mean, hell, it could even end after this year, and realize that bringing back Deandre Ayton on this contract just didn't necessarily make a lot of sense. Here's why this is significant. We got breaking news from none other than the great Adrian Wojnarowski. Restricted free agent center Deandre Ayton has agreed to a 4-year, $133 million maximum offer sheet with the Indiana Pacers. The Phoenix Suns have 48 hours to match, the largest offer sheet in NBA history. Man, I want to say, like, my very first reaction to this was, okay, it's fine. The Phoenix Suns could just pull off a little sign and trade. Maybe trade Deandre Ayton to the Indiana Pacers and receive Miles Turner and Buddy Hield, and obviously they have to make the salary cap gymnastics work out, but something of that sort. But here's the crazy part, man. They can't do that. Yeah, Deandre Ayton just collectively screwed the Phoenix Suns by doing this, because technically after signing this, and shout out to Rob Perez at Worldwide Woe for explaining this, Deandre Ayton's offer sheet doesn't officially process until midnight tonight, which means he has about 6 hours, maybe 5.5 hours, depending on when you're watching this video, until midnight Eastern time today to be traded to the Indiana Pacers. But dude, if you're the Indiana Pacers, why on earth would you do that? Because now you essentially have the Phoenix Suns in a situation where they could either decide to match DeAndre Ayton's salary and then go $15 million into the luxury tax, which, man, it'd be so nice to see Robert Sarver paying some luxury tax for once in his life, or they need to figure out a way to trade him to some other team within the next 7 hours. So this is gonna cause a ton of urgency in the entire NBA. I mean, I don't necessarily know if the Phoenix Suns still are allowed to try to call up the Brooklyn Nets and trade DeAndre Ayton to the Brooklyn Nets. I'm unsure if that's legal at this point, but at this point, DeAndre Ayton just completely screwed the Phoenix Suns. I mean, maybe the Indiana Pacers are in a situation where they'd be interested in negotiating with the Suns at this point, but why would you do that if you know the Suns are reluctant to match the offer sheet that DeAndre Ayton is given? So to summarize all this, Phoenix has until Saturday night, midnight, to match the largest offer sheet in NBA history. The contract is binding, and a sign and trade cannot be completed. If Phoenix matches, Ayton has veto power on any trade after January 15th, and he cannot be traded to the team that offered him the offer sheet, which is the Indiana Pacers. Now, in addition to this, Indiana technically doesn't have the cap space to sign DeAndre Ayton, so they have to clear $4.7 million in cap space to reach $30.9 million in salary. And they actually did end up doing this by waiving guard Dwayne Washington and waiving and stretching the 3 players who arrived in the Boston trade for Malcolm Brogdon, Malik Fitz, Juwan Morgan, and Nick Stauskas. That'll create the cap space to sign DeAndre Ayton to the max offer sheet. Now, so far, the Phoenix Suns haven't shown an interest in negotiating a sign and trade on Ayton with the Pacers, but the expectation remains that the Phoenix Suns will match the record $133 million offer sheet once it's signed, sources tell ESPN. Now, the Suns could trade Ayton as soon as January 15th once the sheet is matched. If the Suns match, however, once again, DeAndre Ayton has veto power in any trade for a full year. So here's how I'm grading this, man. For the Indiana Pacers, I give them an A+. I mean, honestly, if there was any opportunity to acquire a young center that you could potentially develop a former #1 overall pick, this is probably the best means of doing so. So you shot your shot. I don't necessarily think that the Phoenix Suns are going to let him go, but they are the Phoenix Suns, so with them, nothing really surprises me at this point. If you get Deandre Ayton, then you also have Miles Turner and Buddy Hield you could still trade to other teams, and I honestly think the Indiana Pacers are just doing wonderfully in their rebuild so far. Every single step of the way they went about it by saying that every single player is on the trade block, the assets they were able to get in return for some of those players, like they got Tyrese Halliburton back for Deandre Sabonis. That's a player that you could rebuild around and at least have your fans excited about as you're rebuilding. So even though it might be a long shot that they get Deandre Ayton, I still think this was a great move for them. For Deandre Ayton, man, I tweeted this out. This man is a master businessman. I don't know if it was him or if it was his agency. It was probably his agent by telling him to do this, but it was an absolute genius decision by going to any team that'd be interested in his services, signing a max contract offer sheet, and then looking at the Phoenix Suns and saying, your move, while the Phoenix Suns were trying to trade him over this past offseason. I mean, if you're Deandre Ayton, man, if you could play on the Phoenix Suns with a maximum contract, that's probably the biggest W possible. I mean, you're playing on a team that's contending in the West, and you're getting paid big money to do so. I don't think there's a bigger possible W than running it back with Devin Booker and Chris Paul and Mikal Bridges and getting that maximum contract deal that pays you just a little bit over $33 million a year annually. For the Phoenix Suns, man, it's really hard to grade them, mainly because I don't necessarily know how hard they tried to trade Deandre Ayton. I don't necessarily know if this was all a plan of theirs to initially say last offseason that they were interested in moving on from Deandre Ayton, that they didn't want to sign him to a maximum contract, and then just seeing what the market for Deandre Ayton was before not really being able to trade him. If the Phoenix Suns do match the contract, which is what we're expected to do, then I still will have to give them like anywhere from a C- to a D+, because you don't say that you are not intending on signing one of your top players and then wait an entire season and still not trade him once he's eligible to hit restricted free agency. That's just stupid. But again, I don't necessarily know how hard the Phoenix Suns front office tried to trade Deandre Ayton. I'm sure that there were multiple phone calls with the Brooklyn Nets front office to try to get Kevin Durant, but maybe the Brooklyn Nets were just not interested in any offer that had to do with Deandre Ayton. But regardless, if it was your plan to move on from Deandre Ayton and not sign him to a max contract, I feel like they should have been a little bit more aggressive in trying to trade him this offseason, and the fact that they weren't able to is why I give them such a low grade. Let me know in the comment section down below what you guys think about all of this, man. It's going to get really interesting. It looks like the Suns are going to match the offer sheet. If they don't, then obviously I'm going to give them an F for this, but I'd like to hear what you have to say in the comment section down below. Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.